When the heart breaks its own rules. A love story between Bryan and Leo. Rain lashed against the windows of Maya's Brooklyn brownstone like 1,000 impatient fingers tapping for entry. Inside, the house was quiet, too quiet. Bryan stood in the kitchen, shirt damp from the sudden downpour that had caught him halfway between the subway and the front door. He'd come over to water Maya's plants while she was away at her weekend mindfulness retreat in the Catskills. Simple task, in and out, but fate, it seemed, had other plans. He hadn't expected Leo to still be here. Maya's boyfriend, his sister's boyfriend, was supposed to have left hours ago. Yet there he was, barefoot in the hallway, wearing only a pair of gray sweatpants slung low on his hips, hair tousled like he'd just rolled out of bed. Or maybe he hadn't slept at all. "Hey," Leo said, voice rough with something Bryan couldn't name. "You're soaked." Bryan nodded, peeling off his wet jacket and hanging it on the hook by the door. "Forgot my umbrella. Again." Leo stepped closer, the scent of cedar and warm skin wrapping around Bryan like an embrace he hadn't asked for, but desperately wanted. He'd always noticed how Leo smelled. Not cologne, not soap, just him. Clean, masculine, intoxicating. "You should take a hot shower," Leo said, leaning against the kitchen island. "Before you catch cold." "I'm fine," Bryan muttered, though his teeth were chattering slightly. Leo's eyes flickered over him, slow, deliberate, like he was memorizing every detail. That look had haunted Bryan for months. Ever since Thanksgiving, when he'd caught Leo watching him during that ridiculous charades game. The way Leo's gaze had lingered on his mouth while Maya laughed beside him, Bryan had felt it like a brand on his skin. They'd never talked about it, never acknowledged the tension that thickened the air whenever they were alone. But tonight, with Maya miles away and the storm sealing them in this house like secrets in a vault, denial felt impossible. "You've been avoiding me," Leo said suddenly, voice low. Bryan stiffened. "I haven't. You have." Leo pushed off the counter and closed the distance between them. "Every time I come over, you find an excuse to leave. You don't look at me anymore." "Not really. I'm looking at you now," Bryan whispered. And he was really looking at the sharp line of Leo's jaw, the faint stubble shadowing it. At the way his dark eyes held galaxies of unspoken things. At the pulse beating in his throat, fast and nervous. Leo exhaled sharply. "Then tell me what you see." Bryan's throat tightened. Trouble. A ghost of a smile touched Leo's lips. "Maybe. Or maybe salvation." Their breaths mingled in the space between them. Rain drummed harder against the glass. Somewhere upstairs, a floorboard creaked, just the house settling, but it sounded like a warning. "We can't do this," Bryan said, even as his hand found Leo's wrist.
"I can't do this anymore." "Then don't."
His thumb brushed over the delicate bone there, feeling the frantic rhythm of Leo's pulse beneath his skin. "Why not?" Leo stepped closer, so close their chests nearly touched. "Because she's your sister. Because I'm supposed to be loyal to her." "Yes," Bryan breathed. "And yet," Leo's free hand rose, cupping Bryan's jaw with a tenderness that made his chest ache. "You're still holding onto me." Bryan closed his eyes. He wanted to pull away. He should pull away, but his body refused to obey. Every cell in him leaned into Leo's touch like a flower turning toward the sun. I dream about you, Leo confessed, voice raw. Not in some fantasy way. Just you, laughing, reading, sleeping. I imagine what it would feel like to wake up next to you. To kiss you good morning. To hold you when you're sad. Bryan's eyes flew open. Stop. I can't. Leo's thumb traced his lower lip, slow and maddening. I've tried. For months, I've tried. But every time I see you, it's like my heart forgets how to beat unless you're near. The words hit Bryan like a punch to the gut. Because he felt it too. That magnetic pull, that unbearable longing. He'd told himself it was nothing, just chemistry without consequence. But standing here, with Leo's warmth seeping into his bones, he knew the truth. This was love. Messy, inconvenient, undeniable love. Their first kiss wasn't gentle. It was a collision, of guilt and hunger, of years of restraint finally snapping. Leo's mouth crashed against his, demanding and desperate, and Bryan met him with equal fervor. Teeth clashed, tongues tangled, hands fisted in fabric. It was chaos and clarity all at once. When they finally broke apart, foreheads pressed together, both were breathless. This changes everything, Bryan said, voice trembling. Leo nodded, eyes shining with something like relief. I know. They didn't talk about consequences. Didn't mention Maya. Not yet. Because in that moment, all that mattered was the truth they'd been running from. Love doesn't ask permission. It simply arrives, and demands to be felt. Leo led him upstairs to the guest room, the one Bryan usually stayed in when he visited. The room was dim, lit only by the street lamp outside casting long shadows across the walls. Rain still pattered against the window, a steady rhythm that matched the pounding of Bryan's heart. Leo turned to him, hands framing his face. Tell me to stop, he whispered. Tell me this is wrong, and I'll walk away right now. Bryan looked into his eyes, those deep, soulful eyes that had haunted his dreams, and knew he couldn't. I can't, he admitted. I've tried. God knows I've tried, but every time I see you, it's like I'm coming home. Bryan trembled beneath him, overwhelmed by the sheer tenderness of it all. This wasn't just desire, it was reverence. When Leo finally pulled him close, wrapping strong arms around him, Bryan buried his face in Leo's shoulder and let out a shuddering breath. I'm scared, he admitted. Me too, Leo said, pressing a kiss to his temple. But I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you. They lay like that for a long time, listening to the rain and each other's heartbeats. No words were needed. The silence between them was full of understanding, of shared vulnerability. Later, as dawn began to lighten the sky, Bryan traced the line of Leo's collarbone and whispered, "What do we do now?" Leo turned to him, eyes soft with affection. We figure it out, together. And for the first time, Bryan believed they could. 1 month later, they sat across from Maya at their favorite brunch spot in Williamsburg. Sunlight streamed through the windows, glinting off the chrome fixtures and casting golden highlights in Maya's dark hair. She stirred her latte slowly, a small, knowing smile playing on her lips. So, she said, setting her spoon down with a soft clink. Are you two going to tell me, or do I have to keep pretending I didn't see you holding hands under the table last week? Bryan and Leo exchanged a glance, nervous, then relieved. They'd known this conversation was coming. Had rehearsed it in their heads 100 times. But now that it was here, words failed them. Maya reached across the table, placing one hand over Bryan's and the other over Leo's. "Look at me," she said gently. They did. "I'm not stupid," she continued. "I've seen the way you look at each other. The way you light up when the other walks into a room. The way you finish each other's sentences." She paused, her eyes glistening. "I'd be lying if I said it didn't hurt at first. But I love you both. And I want you to be happy." Bryan's throat tightened. "We never meant to hurt you." "I know." Maya squeezed their hands. "And honestly, I think this might be the best thing that's ever happened to either of you." Leo blinked rapidly, clearly fighting back tears. "You're not angry." "Angry?" Maya laughed softly. "No, confused. A little, but mostly relieved. Because I've watched you both carry this weight for so long. And now you don't have to." She leaned back in her chair, studying them with a mix of fondness and amusement. "Besides, I always thought you two would end up together. Even before I dated Leo." Bryan stared at her. "What?" Maya grinned. "Oh, come on. The tension between you two was thicker than my avocado toast. I just didn't say anything because, well, I figured you'd figure it out eventually." Leo shook his head, laughing. "You're unbelievable. And you two are idiots," Maya shot back, but her smile was warm. "Now, are we going to sit here all day talking about feelings, or are we going to order pancakes?" Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, bathing the street in golden light. And inside, 3 hearts began to heal, together. The loft was filled with the scent of fresh paint and new beginnings. Boxes were stacked in corners, half unpacked, but the essentials were already in place. The worn leather couch they'd bought together, the record player spinning a vinyl of their favorite album, the framed photo on the mantle of the 3 of them at Maya's wedding. She'd married her yoga instructor, Dev, 6 months ago. Bryan stood by the window, watching the city lights twinkle below. Strong arms wrapped around his waist from behind, and Leo rested his chin on his shoulder. "Penny for your thoughts," Leo murmured. Bryan covered his hands with his own. "Just thinking how lucky I am." Leo turned him gently, pressing a soft kiss to his lips. "You're not the only one." They'd built something beautiful out of broken rules and honest hearts. It hadn't been easy. There were still moments of guilt, of uncertainty, but they faced it together. And Maya, she was their biggest cheerleader, their anchor, their family. As Leo pulled him closer, Bryan knew he'd chosen right. Love wasn't about following the rules. It was about following your heart, even when it led you somewhere unexpected. And in Leo's arms, he was exactly where he was meant to be.